Welcome to this week's The Longevity Lab MD podcast. You're here because, like me, you're really fascinated by this idea of, well, not just living longer, but living better for longer, really digging into the science of aging. We got my good co-host David Bailey here with us today, who is going to go through with me on the fascinating subject of David Sinclair was right. The future of aging is here.
It's great to be back. It's a fascinating area.
And David Sinclair name is truly associated with science of longevity. And I feel he's a leading light in this whole field.
Absolutely. A big name. Professor at Harvard Medical School, author of Lifespan. His work on epigenetics is, well, pretty groundbreaking.
Exactly. So our mission today really is to get a handle on his core ideas, understand the impact his research is having, and maybe most importantly for you listening, pull out some clear insights and some actionable steps you might consider.
Yeah, translate the complex stuff into something useful.
We've got a lot to draw on for this deep dive. Everything from, the real nitty-gritty scientific papers on caloric restrictions, cellular senescence, things like that. Right?
Right, the primary sources.
To Sinclair's own book, Lifespan, of course, some really insightful interviews he's done on various channels.
Yeah, like Huberman's and Jesse Chappas's. Good stuff there.
And even looking at the business side, the growing market reports on longevity and anti-aging gives you a different perspective.
Definitely shows the growing interest.
Okay, so let's dive in. One of the first things I think that really grabs you about Dr. Sinclair is how he views aging itself.
Yeah.
Well, it's pretty different, isn't it?
It really is. He fundamentally challenges the idea that aging is just inevitable. He proposes we should think of aging as a disease.
A disease.
Yeah. He argues it's the underlying cause, or at least the major driver, of most chronic illnesses and ultimately death. And just because it happens to, pretty much everyone eventually.
Right. Over half the population.
Exactly. He says that agents shouldn't disqualify it from being treated like a medical condition we can target.
That really shifts the perspective, doesn't it? From just accepting decline to actively looking for interventions.
Precisely. It reframes the entire approach. Instead of resignation, it becomes about investigation and potentially treatment. Like you wouldn't just accept heart disease because it's common.
Makes sense. Okay, so central to his whole framework is epigenetics. Now, for those of us not deep in molecular biology, can you break that down? What is the epigenome and why is it so key here?
Sure. So think of your DNA as like the body's entire hardware manual, right? All the basic instructions.
Okay.
The epigenome then is like the software, or maybe like sticky notes and highlights, telling each specific cell which parts of that manual to read and when to read them.
Okay. So it controls gene expression?
Exactly. It's the layer of control on top of the DNA sequence itself. It involves how the DNA is packaged. Sinclair uses the analogy of a really long string needing careful wrapping, not just a tangled mess.
Right. Remember that.
And chemical marks added to the DNA. These marks essentially switch genes on or off, telling a cell be a nerve cell or be a skin cell, and crucially, stay that way.
So it maintains cell identity, and Sinclair thinks this software gets corrupted over time. That's the aging process.
That's the core of his information theory of aging, yeah. He suggests we gradually lose this precise epigenetic information. His analogy is scratches building up on a DVD.
Okay, like data loss.
Exactly. The original information is still there, technically, on the DNA, but the player, the cell, can't read it properly anymore because of the epigenetic scratches. This leads to cells forgetting their identity, malfunctioning, and ultimately the signs of aging we see.
And he mentioned something about periods like infancy and puberty. That seems counterintuitive.
Yeah, it is interesting. He suggests that these periods of really rapid development and change might actually be times when the epigenome is changing more rapidly too, perhaps making it more vulnerable to accumulating some of these scratches even as we grow. It's a complex idea.
Wow. Okay. And is there evidence for this epigenetic decay actually causing aging like in experiments?
Yes, there's some compelling work, particularly in mice. Researchers have found ways to intentionally accelerate this epigenetic disruption, essentially, to scratch the DVD faster.
And what happened?
Well, the mice show signs of accelerated aging. Things like getting gray fur earlier, developing a hunched spine, their organs looking biologically older. It strongly suggests that this epigenetic information loss isn't just correlated with aging, it might actually be driving it.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. It implies we could potentially influence aging by protecting or restoring the epigenome.
That's the hope, yes. That's the direction the research is heading.
Okay, so if aging is this loss of information, what interventions does Sinclair talk about? Let's start with maybe the most famous one, caloric restriction, eating less to live longer. What's the deal there?
Right, caloric restriction, or CR, it's basically reducing calorie intake significantly, maybe like 25–30%, but without malnutrition. So you still get all your essential vitamins and minerals.
And this works.
What's remarkably consistent, it's probably the single intervention that's most reliably shown to slow down biological aging and extend lifespan across a huge range of species. We're talking yeast, worms, flies, fish, mice, rats.
Well, even up to primates.
The evidence in primates is a bit more nuanced. Studies suggest CR reduces age-related diseases in monkeys, which is huge for Healthspan. Whether it significantly extends maximum lifespan in primates is still debated. The studies are complex. But the health benefits seem pretty clear.
Okay, so better health span, maybe longer lifespan. What about in humans? We can't exactly lock people up for 50 years on CR.
No, exactly. But we have studies like calorie. That involved people cutting calories by 25%
What?
for, I think it was 6 months initially, then longer for some.
And what did they find? Did people just get skinny?
Well, they did lose weight, yeah.
I see.
About 10% on average, mostly fat mass, which is good. But more importantly, key biomarkers associated with longevity improved.
Like what?
Things like significantly lower fasting insulin levels down almost 30% in one phase, and a slightly lower core body temperature. Both of those are consistently linked to slower aging in animal models. DHEAS, another hormone sometimes linked to youth, didn't really change though.
Interesting. So it's not just weight loss, it's deeper metabolic shifts. How does TRAR do that at the cellular level?
A key part of the theory involves sirtuins. These are a family of enzymes, proteins, that act like cellular guardians or regulators.
Okay.
They control really critical pathways involved in stress resistance, metabolism, DNA repair, basically things crucial for keeping cells healthy and resilient. And caloric restriction seems to ramp up their activity.
So CR puts the body into a kind of protective repair-focused mode mediated by sirtuins.
That's the thinking, yes. It's like triggering ancient survival circuits that happen to also slow down aging. But there's a catch.
What's that?
Sirtuins need fuel to work. Specifically, a molecule called NAD plus cadre, nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide.
NAD plus. Okay. Right? That comes up all the time in longevity discussions. Why is it so important?
Because NAD plus levels naturally decline quite significantly as we get older.
So, less fuel for the sirtuins.
Exactly. Sinclair uses the analogy of a car. You can have an accelerator pedal, maybe like resveratrol, something activates sirtuins, but if the car has no gas, NAD plus, pressing the pedal does nothing.
Got it. So we need NAD plus for sirtuins to function, and NAD plus declines with age. That leads us to supplements like NMN and NR, right?
Precisely. Nicotinamide mononucleotide, NMN, and nicotinamide riboside, NRR, are NAD plus precursors. They're basically building blocks the body can use to make more NAD plus vints.
And these are popular supplements now. Sinclair takes NMN himself, I believe.
Yes, he's mentioned taking NMN. The idea is that by boosting NAD plus levels, you can potentially restore sirtuin activity closer to youthful levels.
Is there evidence this works in humans?
It's still early days, but there are clinical trials happening, including at Harvard. They're looking at things like whether NAD plus precursors improve energetics, muscle function, endurance in older people. Some early signs seem positive, maybe pointing towards increased endurance, but we need more data.
Okay, so boosting NAD plus is one strategy. What about things that directly activate sirtuins, like that resveratrol you mentioned? We hear about it in red wine.
Yeah, resveratrol is a polyphenol found in grape skins, berries, nuts. It gained a lot of fame for its potential to activate sirtuins, particularly SORO-T1, and possibly mimic some effects of caloric restriction.
Does it work? The red wine thing always sounded a bit too good to be true.
Well, you'd need to drink a lot of red wine to get the doses used in some studies. But research in mice was interesting. It showed resveratrol could protect mice on a high-fat diet from some negative consequences.
Okay, protection. Did it extend lifespan?
Here's a fascinating bit. Some supplemental data, kind of buried in one of the major studies, apparently suggested that giving resveratrol to mice on a normal diet, but only every other day, dramatically extended their lifespan.
Every other day, that's specific. Maybe pulsing it is key.
It's intriguing, right? It suggests maybe constant activation isn't the goal. Perhaps letting the system rest is important too. Sinclair himself takes resveratrol about 1 gram a day.
A gram, that's quite a bit.
It is. And he mentions taking it with yogurt or olive oil because it's fat soluble, helps with absorption.
Right, and he takes other similar compounds too, polyphenols.
Yeah, he occasionally mentioned taking smaller doses of things like quercetin, fisetin, apigenin. These are other plant compounds that might have beneficial effects.
Fisetin, didn't you mention that earlier with something else?
Yes. Good catch. Fisetin is interesting because some research suggests it might also help clear out senescent cells, those zombie cells we'll talk more about. So it could be a kind of double whammy, potentially activating sirtuins and acting as a senolytic.
Okay, interesting. And Sinclair talks about these plant molecules as xenohormetic. What's that?
Xenohormesis is the idea that stress plants produce molecules to protect themselves. And when we eat those plants, the molecules trigger beneficial stress responses in our bodies, activating our own defense and repair pathway. Pomegranate juice is another example he sometimes gives.
Like borrowing a plant's stress response. Cool concept. Okay, shifting from supplements back to diet patterns. Sinclair is big on intermittent fasting, right? Not just CR.
Absolutely. He's a strong proponent. He often suggests trying to skip 1 meal a day, maybe breakfast or dinner, to extend that natural overnight fast.
He does that himself, doesn't he? Often 1 meal a day.
Yeah, he's mentioned frequently eating just 1 main meal later in the day. He finds it helps keep his blood sugar stable, improves focus.
Beyond just the daily window, what about longer fasts?
He talks about those too. Longer fasts, maybe 2 or 3 days, potentially done, say, once a month, might more strongly activate autophagy.
Autophagy, that's the cellular cleanup process.
Exactly. The body starts breaking down and recycling old, damaged cellular components, misfolded proteins. It's like cellular housekeeping. And there's even a potentially deeper level chaperone-mediated autophagy that might really kick in around day 2 or 3.
And that's beneficial.
Research in mice suggests it could be very beneficial. Triggering this deeper autophagy in old mice apparently extended their lifespan by something like 35%, huge number.
Wow, so fasting is about triggering these cleanup and repair modes. Does he prefer fasting or strict calorie restriction?
He seems to lean towards time-restricted eating or an eating window, maybe with occasional longer fasts. He finds strict long-term CR very difficult for most people to stick with, and it can sometimes make building or maintaining muscle harder.
Yeah, sustainability is key. Okay, what about pharmaceuticals? We hear about metformin and sometimes rapamycin in longevity circles. What's Sinclair's take?
Right, metformin is a common type 2 diabetes drug. Sinclair has mentioned taking it in the past, though I think he now uses berberine more often.
Why metformin for longevity?
It's being studied extensively. It seems to impact mitochondrial function, specifically complex one of the respiratory chain, and it definitely helps lower blood sugar. These effects might mimic aspects of CR and contribute to longevity.
And berberine.
Berberine is a natural compound derived from plants. It's often called, sort of jokingly, nature's metformin, or the poor man's metformin. Studies suggest it can lower blood sugar and maybe cholesterol too, possibly through similar mechanisms to metformin.
And Sinclair switched mainly to berberine.
Yeah, he mentioned experiencing some stomach issues with metformin, which some people do, so he uses berberine primarily now. But it's crucial to stress. Metformin is a prescription drug. You absolutely need to talk to a doctor about it.
Right, yeah, of course. Doctor supervision is essential there. And okay, how about rapamycin?
Rapamycin is another interesting one. Sinclair has said he's currently taking a low dose, maybe once a week. It targets a different major aging pathway called mTOR.
mTOR related to growth.
Yeah, mTOR is involved in growth and metabolism. Generally lowering mTOR activity, which can also be influenced by diet, like eating fewer meat-based amino acids, is thought to promote longevity pathways. So rapamycin inhibits mTOR.
Okay, another complex pathway. Now let's circle back to those senescent cells you mentioned with visitin, the zombie cells. Can you explain those a bit more?
Sure. So cellular senescence is basically when a cell gets old or damaged and stops dividing. But crucially, it doesn't die and get cleared away like it should. It just hangs around.
So truly a zombie cell.
Pretty much. And the problem is, these senescent cells aren't just inert. They actively secrete a cocktail of inflammatory molecules and other damaging factors. This is called the SASP, the senescence-associated secretory phenotype.
SASP. Okay, so they're like toxic neighbors.
Exactly. They create this chronic, low-grade inflammation and damage in the surrounding tissue, which drives many age-related diseases, arthritis, neurodegeneration, cardiovascular issues, and generally accelerates aging, shortening health span and lifespan.
That sounds bad. Can we get rid of them?
That's the goal of senolytics. These are drugs or compounds designed specifically to target and kill off senescent cells while leaving healthy cells unharmed.
And what are some examples?
The combination of dasatinib, a cancer drug, plus quercetin, a flavonoid found in onions and apples, often called D plus Q, is one well-studied example. And fisetin, as we discussed, also shows senolytic activity in research.
So this is a hot area of research.
Oh, absolutely. The whole field of senolytics and anti-aging pharmaceuticals is booming. You see reports like the market size being over $4 billion in 2024 and expected to grow rapidly. It reflects the hope that targeting senescence could be a powerful anti-aging strategy.
Makes sense, given the potential impact. Now, beyond diet supplements, potential drugs, what other lifestyle factors does Sinclair highlight? It's not all pills and potions, right?
Definitely not. Lifestyle is foundational. Exercise is, of course, hugely important. He emphasizes regular activity for overall health and longevity.
And stress.
Managing stress is critical, too. Sinclair has talked about using mental exercises, like analyzing worst-case scenarios to sort of diffuse their power and just finding quiet time. He also meditates a few times a week.
Sleep, too, I imagine.
Absolutely essential.
Yeah.
He prioritizes getting high-quality sleep, aiming to fall asleep quickly and sleep deeply. He even deliberately lowers his bedroom temperature, which can help promote better sleep.
Does he mention alcohol?
Yes, he's mentioned significantly cutting back on alcohol, citing its negative effects, particularly on the brain and sleep quality.
Anything else on the lifestyle front?
He also advises being generally mindful of unnecessary radiation exposure, thinking twice about frequent airport body scans or routine dental x-rays unless clearly needed. Little things that add up.
So it really is a whole picture approach: diet, exercise, stress, sleep, environment. Okay, let's just recap his main theory one more time. The information theory of aging. What's the absolute core idea?
The core idea is that aging isn't primarily about damage to the hardware, the DNA itself. It's about the loss of the software, the epigenetic information that tells the hardware what to do.
The scratches on the DVD.
Exactly. And his lab's big goal is essentially trying to find the backup copy of that original useful software.
Whoa, a backup copy.
And figure out how to reinstall it, or at least polish the scratches to restore youthful function.
Is that actually possible, restoring epigenetic information?
Well, they've had some stunning results recently. Using gene therapy to introduce what are called Yamanaka factors, specific genes, they've been able to reprogram cells in living animals. They actually restored vision in old mice and even in non-human primates by essentially resetting the epigenetic clock in the optic nerve cell.
Restored vision. That's incredible.
It's remarkable. And it provides strong support for the idea that this loss of epigenetic information really is a cause of aging, not just a consequence, because they showed it's potentially reversible, at least in some tissues.
But it's still a theory being debated.
Oh, for sure. It's cutting edge. And like any major new theory, it's still being rigorously tested and debated by other scientists. Not everyone's convinced it's the whole story of aging, but it's certainly a powerful and influential part of the conversation.
Definitely. Okay. So bringing this all together for someone listening, for a health enthusiast wanting to apply some of these ideas, what are the key actionable takeaways from Sinclair's perspective?
Well, based on what he discusses, you could consider trying intermittent fasting. Maybe just skipping one meal a day to start.
Okay.
Explore eating more plants, aiming for a diet rich in those colorful polyphenols. Think berries, leafy greens, nuts.
Makes sense.
If you're considering supplements like NMN, resveratrol, or berberine, definitely talk to your doctor first. And if you do take them, look for reputable brands with good manufacturing practices, GMP certification, and third-party testing for purity and dose.
Crucial point on quality control.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then the foundations. Prioritize regular exercise you actually enjoy, find healthy ways to manage stress, and make getting enough high-quality sleep a real priority. Don't underestimate those basics.
And maybe track things by doing blood work or health screenings.
Yeah, getting regular blood tests to monitor key markers Lipids, blood sugar, inflammation levels, and discussing them with your doctor can give you valuable feedback on how your lifestyle choices are impacting your internal health.
Fantastic. This has been incredibly insightful, really unpacking David Sinclair's work and his view on longevity. So, to recap the big themes, viewing aging as a treatable condition, the huge importance of the epigenome, that software layer,
Right, the information theory.
and the potential still being explored, of course, for interventions like caloric restriction, NAD plus boosters, senolytics, fasting protocols.
And maybe even cellular reprogramming down the line. It's a fast-moving
It
field.
really is, which is why, as always, we have to stress, keep learning, stay informed, but always talk to your own healthcare professional before making big changes based on this stuff. I feel in this day and age, especially for people who want to live healthier, it's important to have a healthcare professional, a doctor, as your personalized longevity partner.
Couldn't agree more. Personalized advice is key.
So, as we finish up this deep dive, here's a final thought to maybe chew on. If aging really is something we can influence, maybe even reverse to some extent, how does that change things?
Big question.
How might it change your personal health choices knowing that decline isn't necessarily inevitable? And how might it shift society's views on aging, health span, and the value we place on those later, potentially healthier years?
Yeah, the implications are profound both individually and collectively. Thinking about living longer and healthier lives. It opens up a lot.
Definitely something to ponder. Thanks so much for joining us for this week's The Longevity Lab MD podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcast. Every week, we are looking at the trendiest topics in the health and longevity world. And to be honest, in this day and age, you got to keep yourself informed as much as possible, as science is really moving fast. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.